everybody, welcome back. Today we're getting back on west of Sonoma, getting this bumper tied up, mounting the center section of this thing. There's also some details to make this bumper actually fit this truck we're going to get into also. If you didn't see the last video, why not? It wasn't my best work, but it was pretty good anyway. So go check it out so you can stay up to date on what's happening with this truck. So speaking of that last video, I didn't have all the detail in it that I would really like to put in, but to be honest, I was losing my mind over this front bumper. Nothing on this front end is straight or square, so it made it really hard to get the bumper in the right spot. The whole front end is actually shifted over to one side a little bit. It's not the biggest deal in the world, but to add to that, for some reason, both front fenders are actually welded to the truck. Down in the wheel wells and in the fender tubs. Not sure why you would do that, but it was causing me fits. Then he ended up backed up, got the grill out of my way, and found out that along here, the hood actually lines up really well with the fenders. So that gave me something to start with when it came to measuring for this bumper. What I found out was I could measure off the bottom of the hood down to the bumper, make sure that it's running square side to side. I could also measure off the front of the hood down to the front of the bumper, make sure that it sticks out the right amount. Now it's time to get this center support built so I can start to lock in the location of this bumper. I'll go back by and measure this opening one more time, make sure all this temporary shim stuff I've got going on here actually holds the bumper where I want it to be. The bumper's running downhill on this side compared to the hood, about 1/8 of an inch. It's not a big deal. I'm trying to keep about an 1/8 inch gap between the fender here and the side of the bumper. Using the factory bumper brackets, I still have a lot of adjustment left. So I'm going to leave this section adjustable, but I don't paint myself in a corner when it comes time for final fitment. I probably won't be the one putting this bumper on after it's painted, but I want to make sure that Wes isn't cussing me when it comes to that point. Alright, here's the deal. These are the frame horns. I had the bumper mocked up. I just stacked a little bit of shims here and here and clamped the bumper down in order to get it visualized across the hood. What I found was I'm up above these frame horns, so I don't need to cut them or anything like that. What I will do, bring some tubing from horn to horn across that way, build a bracket out this way on the frame side. Now on the bumper side, I'll build a bracket to receive that, bolt the whole thing together. I'll leave slot in the holes so you can move the bumper side to side and up and down to get the alignment dialed in the end. And I'm going to add a little bit of shim between the two brackets so you can shim the bumper out this way if you need to. And before I took the bumper off, I did mark the brackets down here at the bottom edge of the bumper, so I keep my brackets up above those. Okay, got a piece of tubing cut for the lower end of the frame horns. Got the inside of the frame horns all cleaned up, actually using magnets and a piece of wood. Got this side right where I want it. I'm just going to tack it for now. I'll have to come over to this side, get it pulled up in place so I can tack that in, make sure it's level, square, and right where I want it. Now I ain't heard a welder fired off in anger in weeks, so my trigger finger is getting a little itchy. Get that side tacked in. I've said it before, but I'll say it again. Make sure you put your tacks in a spot you can get to them if you need to cut them off later on. That is all. Well, after all that talk about not screwing myself, I went ahead and did it anyway. That tube's right in the way of getting the other one in here. Now I gotta pop those tacks out. Professional-ish. Well, like I said from the beginning, we're going to start with the top bar so I can get the bottom bar in. You really got to think ahead on this kind of stuff. It's really tough getting things figured out here since it's just kind of floating in space. So what I'm going to do is use super square here. Just taking a couple squares, put them together to give me kind of a go, no-go gauge to get this tube lined up. Here, just go off the core support, get nice and square there. Come over to this side, locate the driver's side. Come on, machine gun, let's get tacky. Alright, top tube's tacked in, bottom tube's pretty much square parallel to it. Got our calibrated piece of wood back in here. Once again, I'm going to go back, tack this side, get the other side dialed in, then tack that side. Want these tubes to run parallel to each other and not be off side to side, just from each other. Come on, machine gun. baby. Bracket time. I'm gonna have a bracket that comes off here, holds a plate. They'll have holes in it that will then bolt to the bumper side bracket. As usual, we're gonna start with some ram board. Got this scrap piece and a straight edge across the top. Just gonna lay this baby up against here, make a mark on the bottom. There's our starting point for this bracket. In addition to that, I want to know the center to center measurement on these 1-inch tubes that I've got tacked in place. I'm going to use this monstrosity to check that out. I lay these babies across here, check it all the way across. They have a 4 1/8 inch spacing. Transfer that onto the ram board, get this thing laid out. Okay, so here's how this bracket's going to get laid out. Starting point laid out here. This is just a random angle that looked good coming off of those tubes. There's your center to center on my 2 marks. Now this line represents the top of the top tube. This line represents the top of the bottom tube. Take a piece of that scrap tubing, place around it. Hands are shaking, too much coffee this morning. And the same down here. I'm gonna cut these holes and go test fit it on the truck. All right, this template works out. Template's laid out pretty well so far. Now what I need to do is get a straight edge along here that the frame side bracket will weld to. I don't want it to stick out past these frame horns, so I give myself plenty of room to build the bumper side. So I'm going to trace this edge onto this template. Alright, I want to stay inside this mark. What I'm going to do is come out to the middle here. Bring my old friend the protractor. I'm going to arbitrarily lay it up somewhere in here. What I'm looking for, 88 degrees. 88 degrees matches the slope of the bumper. What I did before is I stuck the protractor on the outside of the bumper before I took it off, measured it on 2 sides of the beak, and got about 88 degrees. So there's my new line. That line right there is going to be the outside of these brackets. Here we have the rough bracket. Went ahead and cut this edge back and found out this line right here, this will be the straight portion of the bracket. This is where the plate will weld to that will eventually bolt to the bumper side. Got a little bit of trimming to do here, but this is where I'm going to start. I'm going to transfer this onto the plate, get it cut out with the plasma, start whittling it down, try to turn it into something kind of nice looking. Alright, so the brackets are all trimmed up, got the edges kind of matching. Just going to go in here now, lay out these holes, go over the drill press, knock a 1-inch hole in these, keeping that 4 1/8 inch center to center. Once I know all that stuff fits on the tubes on the actual truck, I'll start to shape these down and make them look a little bit more nice. Alright, after a few hours worth of work, got these brackets all cleaned up, matching side to side. Got these laid out 8 inches apart from each other, off a center line of the cab. Haven't decided exactly how far out I'm going to bring the bracket. It's going to get welded to all this stuff. Really need to look at the bumper to get that figured out. Alright, next up, these plates. Shape these plates together so that they match. Have just a little radius. One of these is going to go onto the body side bracket. The other one will go to the bumper side. Before I get too carried away with these things, I want to make sure there's no fitment issues. So I'm going to take one of these, weld it to the frame side, and just clamp the bumper side to it. Get the bumper back in place. Make sure that these edges don't stick out too far or get in the way of the shape of the bumper since it's got that beak on it. Let's get to tacking. In order to get that plate across here, straight, level, and in the spot I'm looking for, clamp this piece of aluminum in here, right along the edge of that line that I scribed. That way I can just set that plate on, like so, and tack it. Alright, with this baby tacked up in a decent spot, I clamp that other plate to it, get the bumper back up, see what kind of space I'm dealing with. Hey, actually, oh man, nobody's ever done that before. I wonder if Wes would like it.
Wesley?
Alright, come here. Now these plates are going to get slotted like I talked about for alignment. I'm going to slot one plate vertically, the other plate horizontally. That way you should be able to move the bumper left and right and up and down to get it dialed in just right in the end. So to do that, I'm going to lay these babies out together, drill a center mark right through both of them. That'll be my beginning point. Ah, drill press. If only you could talk. Got both plates clamped in. And drill pilot hole here, pilot hole there, and then start slotting these plates. Hey, wait a minute. Night shift took my oblong drill bits. Fucking Gary. So I couldn't cut these the way I wanted to. So I have to get a little bit jiggy to make this thing into a slot. Here's what I'm going to do. Drill 2 holes on either end. Just going to come in here with a plasma, slot those out, come in, clean up with a die grinder, and boom, we'll have some slots. Bing bong. Slots. Now with these plates slotted in opposite directions, time to start welding this thing up. Use a couple of big ass washers as spacers. Fill in for any shims that might get used down the road. Leave a little bit of space to suck this thing in toward the body. That's what ends up needing to be done. I'll bolt all this stuff up. Tack it all together. Let's take this over to the truck. Alright, all this stuff's welded up. Something's up with this tube. There's like a coating on it or something that is just giving me fits trying to weld it. Whatever. This baby lined up. So speaking of welding, that brings us to the new tech corner portion here at Boogie Chassis.
Voy a cantar esta canción con mucho cariño de mi corazón a la República Dominicana, la casa del merengue y la casa de la bachata. Voy a cantar.
So last time I went to the store and got weld wire, I got some 030 like usual. There was only one of these little 5-pound spools, so I ended up having to get 025 as well. Now 025 wire has some special handling considerations you need to know before you start running this stuff. The first step is you take this spool, yes, then you get yourself some 030 wire like Jesus intended. Enough of that shit. Time to get the bumper side of this bracket built. And I don't know how the fuck I'm going to do that. I don't feel anything. Except maybe diabetes. Maybe a little more. I know. That did it. So with that inspiration, 3 days worth of sugar, got a plan. Should be no surprise. Gonna come in here, use some ram board, bent piece of plate, precision guesswork, and hopefully some Clecos. So I've been hard at work making templates here. As you can see, I have a couple failed experiments. One of these things is the right template. Hey, there it is. Now before I go pulling all this apart, clamp this piece of plate in here, square to this bracket, so that I can transfer marks out onto the bumper. So I've got a reference once I take the bumper off to weld the bumper side brackets on. I also marked the inside where the plates for all these brackets line up, so I have a prayer getting these brackets in the right spot. I also gave myself some alignment marks on the sides, so I get this bumper back in place a little bit more easily. Alright, got a couple of plates cut. These are going to end up being the bumper side brackets. Right now they're nothing more than pieces of 1/8 inch plate with a red line on them. Hopefully with a lot of cutting, grinding, and cussing, these things will end up working out. First step's going to be getting these bent on Senior Squishy over there, right along this red line. This is the business end of Senior Squishy. Made this up when I was bending brackets, the power steering pump, and the alternator bracket for my truck. All I did was weld a couple pieces of angle iron down to some square tube, give it a nice strong base, and weld another piece of angle iron to another piece of tubing to push down on it to make a die. As you can see, there's quite a bit of force here. This tubing's starting to bow. Doesn't really make much difference. I bent 3/16 plate with this stuff. It was actually a pretty wide piece. First step to using this thing is run the ram all the way down. Make sure the dies are aligned. Then just back it off. Get your material, get it in there somewhat straight. The upper die in. And the upper die down again. With a little bit of pressure on it. Line up the mark with the upper die. Make sure they're reasonably straight. And get on it. And there it's just like being in your 20s. You pump all night to get something bent in half in the end. And boom goes the dynamite. Alright, so I got the bumper setting up on some supports on either side. Try to get it level. Now, since this thing's got a beak and a real shape to it, I had to figure out a way to get it leveled and then measure that to make sure that it's sitting level. Use my little angle gauge, set it on a common spot on both sides, got each angle even, calling that level. Since I bent these brackets at a 90, I actually had to take a little bit of bend out of them to get them to sit straight. So in order to measure that, I'm use an angle finder, set it down here on the beak, dial it up till I get 90 degrees. Now this angle is what I'm going to use to check my progress. I'm probably going to use Senior Squishy to take the bend back out of these things now. And there you have it, brackets. So now the final little piece, use my template, sure I got the top and the front facing the right way. Get in here, the side of these brackets, so I can trim those back to the location that should allow me to butt this right up to the bumper. Cross your fingers. Well, I'll be dipped. Now in all seriousness, this thing did just slide right in place, and nobody should be more surprised than I am. We'll go ahead and tack this thing before it changes its mind. So here's what we ended up with. Got the bumper side plate with the slots in it, tacked up to these bumper side brackets that we had to bend, just open from 90 to match the bumper. Clecos are still in. The tacks were really tough to get at, so they look like crap. I'm going to grind those back a little bit and then weld these edges up so I can pop this loose, clean it back, weld the bracket to the bumper itself. Oh, probably need a new wheel. Yeah, let's see. DA, hand punch, curlers. There we go. Here we are. Bumper bracket's all welded up from the backside. Still got a couple holes to fill over here. That's essentially done. Now it's time to extend the sides of this bumper to meet the wheel well openings. Alright, enough jibbering and jabbering. Time to get to extending this bumper. There's a whole lot of shapes going on here. I gotta figure out how to make this thing. Got this curve right here that comes around. Comes down, got this curve right here. It didn't seem all that difficult, but I gotta figure out a way to make all these shapes. And then, once I've got a profile of this thing all the way down, got to find a way to put a curve in it this way and a curve in it this way, right in this big section. I don't know how I'm going to do that, but I do have an idea. I'm going to use this profile gauge to make a replacement piece for the side of the bumper. Shame on you if you didn't watch the video where I used this thing to finish the inside bed rail. I don't think these are any mystery anymore. Just push this up against wherever you got, tap the side, and it gives you a negative and a positive profile for whatever you've got this pushed up against. So this is already set for the side of the bumper. So I'm going to start with a piece of ram board, of course. I'm also going to make sure to trace the outsides of this profile gauge so that I know where the thing starts and stops. Back here from the bumper, I lined up the scribe that I marked on the bumper, lined up the top of this with that mark. I'm just going to draw this line kind of rough, knowing that it sort of doesn't matter. Time to cut this out. Alright, let's give it a shot. It actually lines up pretty well. Now the spot I need to be checking is back here, closer to the wheel well, because that's the shape I care about. This is the shape I'm going to carry back all the way to the wheel well, and then I'll make the radius match the existing wheel well. Now comes the hard part, getting this transferred into some metal. Now while I don't have a whole bunch of tools, I do have some 16 gauge sheet metal, a bunch of tubing, squishy, and a welder. Speaking of welder, check that out. Your boy can weld. All I gotta say, fuck that 025. This thing is gonna be a new die. Try to make a 90 out of this 16 gauge over Mr. Squishy. Let's give that a shot. Alright, over here at Squishy, got the old setup in here. And get this thing out of the way. In its place, it's gonna go this new die I just made. Hopefully this thing doesn't explode into a million pieces and cut my head off. We'll see. Be entertaining either way. I'm gonna say that didn't work. I need something a little bit more robust than this little piece of exhaust tubing. Damn it. Alright, let's try that again. Meet Rev 2. See? Your boy can weld. Don't look at the other side. Beef as hell. Sure, I dragged it out of a dumpster at work, but I got like 2 feet of this stuff. There's the results of the first try. Sure why it creased right here, but it did. Tried to put it back on the same spot that I bent the first time when the die failed. I'll try the other side of this and see if it makes any difference. Well, it happened again. Not really sure why it keeps doing that. Kind of getting annoying. So I got kind of lazy, bought this stuff from a hardware store because I didn't feel like cutting out of the sheet of 16 gauge that I've already got. And I really wanted to try to use 12 gauge. This stuff is listed as 16 gauge. I really think it's 12 gauge or maybe even 10, maybe 14. Yes, no, yes, no, whatever. So I did an experiment with what I know is 16 gauge and it turned out much better. Nice smooth radius. So I'm going to go ahead and build this bumper extension with 16 gauge. Alright, back over here at old Senior Squishy. Got the new die set in. Got some true 16 gauge in this. Let's see how that works. Much better. No kinking, no bullshit. Alright, see how we did. So you can see, lines up pretty well down here. Where the factory bumper makes a harder 90 and a tighter radius, this radius doesn't quite match. I'm not too bothered by that. I want to work on the lower section down here, especially where the bumper turns and starts to roll under really hard. And I'll come back and address this later. Here's where I'm at. Set the profile gauge up again to the shape of that bumper so I can start laying out the center line of the bottom bend. Basically just holding it up here, eyeballing it against this mark I made at the top where the bumper takes a harder radius. I'm trying to find this lower center line. Now, before I start bending this, I need to take a measurement. I want to measure from the top up here, just on this 90, down to this center line. So just in case this actually works, I can repeat it for the other side of the truck. Typically building one of these things isn't so bad, but if you have to match it on the other side, it becomes very difficult if you don't remember what you did. Get that bent up, let's go give it a test fit. So that's pretty close, but it looks like I'm a little low with the center line on this bend. I'm actually going to come back a little bit. I measured 5 3/8 from the top of the 90 back, what I thought was the center line of the bend. If I'd have nailed it on the first shot, I would have called myself a hero and just ran with it. I'm going to come back a little bit on it. Measured back from here down, made a mark at 5 1/4 inches. That's going to be the center line of the bend. Alright, spare you the gory details. 5 1/2 seems to be the one. Lines up nice with the bumper. Pretty happy with that. Time to make another one of these. Alright, for those of you that are still awake, next step is get that bumper trimmed up so I can actually start extending it. Alright, let's do some fit up. Pretty happy with the distance between the bends. That radius lands in a nice spot, so does this one. Now the top up here still needs some massaging to line up perfectly, but we already knew that. Also, this angle here needs a little bit more bend in order to line up with the lower section of the bumper. The next problem is that this is a completely flat, straight piece of sheet metal. And this has a curve to it. Not only does it have a curve like this, it's got a curve this way. It's a compound curve. Usually, we'd take a piece like this, run it through an English wheel, and get a crown in it in both directions, get that compound curve to match this. I don't have an English wheel, so I'm going to have to figure something out there. I think the next step is to get this bumper back on the truck, start getting things lined up. Bumper's cut back, bolt the back in place, got my alignment mark lined up. See how this thing fits. This lines up fairly well, except this radius isn't really a full-on radius. What I gotta do is take the line here and the line here, kind of carry those out onto my panel. So what I'm gonna do, make a mark, maybe. There it is. This is where I'm going to continue this line straight across my panel. I'll probably just start beating it against the side of one of my benches and get that top to roll over so it matches how flat this section of the bumper is. Alright, shoot, that's actually lining up. Down at the bottom of this dips down. Need some more angle in this portion, but that's something I'd rather line up in place. More worried about this section. Really got to get that compound curve into this thing. Never done that before, but I did some research and I think I know what to do with it. Whether or not I can make it work is a different story. Alright, so this is where it gets scary. Got this panel kind of fitting up, but I need to put some compound curve in it so that it matches the shape of the existing bumper. At the very least, I need it to roll this way. I think I'm going to also want it to curve in this direction too, front to back on the truck. So I did some research before I started this whole thing, so I could hopefully be a little bit prepared. I watch a lot of YouTube. One of the things I saw recently that helped me out a lot getting my brain wrapped around how to do this was a guy called Trev's blog. He's an Englishman. We won't hold that against him, but he had some really good tips. Some of the tips were use a low crown hammer. That means not flat. Just a little bit of curve in both directions. And a nice clean dolly. I prepped my hammer face and the dolly with the DA. Hit it with some 80 grit, try to take some of the lumps out of the thing, and then polish it down with some 150. Polishing it to a higher shine would help with keeping any hammer marks out of this thing, but it's good enough for what I'm doing. So the trick is, you just want to work the material in one direction, and it'll actually stretch the metal, which will give you that curve. So what I intend to do is come across here, work it through once, stop, take it over the truck, see how much curve I've put into it. I want to sneak up on this. I don't want to do anything drastic and overdo it. Also, you don't need to beat this thing to death. The technique is described as bouncing the hammer. So, didn't seem to do much. I'm going to go one more pass. I'm actually starting to get some shape in this thing. Let's test fit this up to the truck and see what's going on. Alright, much to my surprise, it's actually happening. Getting just a little bit of shape in here. So I'm going to concentrate more in the center, do a couple 2-3 passes, and take it back over the truck and see what that looks like. Alright, so just that last pass actually made a huge difference. To demonstrate, I'll show you something. This is the opposite side of the bumper that I haven't touched yet. Sits on here nice and flat. Here's the piece that I hammered on. Just those 2 rounds. Look at the difference. Put a decent amount of crown in that thing. Kind of starting down here with my fit up in order to judge where the top is. You guys, that's fairly amazing. Wasn't exactly beating the dickens out of the thing. Very little effort. Now it did deform the top here. Took what was a 90, kind of curved it over because of the curve I put right in here. That's not a big deal. I can pull that curve out and line this edge up. Pretty happy with how that's going. I thought I was going to be pounding that damn thing all day to get any kind of curve in it, but damn it if it isn't coming up. I'm not going to give Jesse James a run for his money, but this is actually working. In fact, I'm so impressed with myself, I might go ahead and just tack this thing in place right here. What I get for using a magnet without a handle on it. Got the tops all shaped in. Now it's time to deal with this section. What I'm going to do is clamp a piece of material to the back side here. Literally just bend that over. Alright, sit rep. Got the sides welded in, went through, got all the shaping put back in place. This thing's actually pretty good. Fairly happy with the way that turned out. I also came in, cut the wheel well line all the way down, took a couple shots to get it dialed in. Started off by coming down from right here, cutting it straight, thinking that would look good. Had some clearance issues with the tires, so I trimmed it back once, then trimmed it back a second time. Here's where we are. Got full steering at all heights with a little bit of bump travel just to make sure this thing doesn't get smashed into and ruined. With all that wrapped up, gonna come in here and cap the end of these bumpers. I address the ends of these bumpers and give them some strength at the same time. I come with a piece of sheet metal, weld it along this edge, dress that edge, and have a nice smooth panel right here. Should look really nice when the truck's laid out. Now to give us some guidance, just using our old friend ram board here. Kinda like this. Kinda like this. Got the bumper all fitted up, got the ends capped, got it up in place, smoothed out, looking good. This edge runs straight back. This is no BS, it would line up like it's supposed to. Being this is an S10, just doesn't quite match well. I'd have to see what Wes thinks about this.
Wesley?
Well, we talked about it, threw some ideas around, got some input from Jason. I think what we're gonna do is kind of bump this out on the bumper, same shape as this line in the fender, to blend S10 and OBS Chevy. This is a feature on the fender, and this is the bumper. You can see here that the bumper sticks out a little bit compared to the fender. Didn't want to have the bumper come along and then abruptly change shape and come back to meet this fender. It's a little hard to tell from this view, but this line comes down and meets the bumper really nice. But back here, it sticks out too far. Now this part of the fender kind of comes over and rolls in like that. I've got to bring this back corner out to match the bumper better. To do this, I'm going to borrow a trick from the Stancy Pants kids. Check this out. Now this is an Eastwood fender roller. Never seen this before. They bolt up to the hub on the vehicle and allow you to push out on the fender for wider tires and such. I've had this thing for quite a few years. Had a car a while back, stuffed some real meaty tires underneath. I needed to make room for suspension traveling. Wasn't a stance car, don't you judge me. Anyway, this is how it works. This bolts up to the hub of the vehicle and then swings back and forth. This dial allows you to slide the head up and down to meet up with the fender. This one controls in and out motion. You can adjust the head to push up or out and give you a little bit more directional control. What we're going to do is adjust this baby down something like that because we want to push straight out. Essentially what's going on is the back right here is in, and I want the back here to come out. Get this baby lined up, now this thing out so it makes contact with the fender. Now I'm going to roll it down like this. I'm going to fuck it all up. Put it back where it was. I'm going to roll it down like this, kind of gently work it back and forth. Adjusting it in and out so that it pushes on the fender. Kind of gently bend everything out to where you want it. This fender, not very well mounted. It makes it very difficult to actually get this thing to move and then stay in place. I'm going to use this instead of as a roller, more like a porta power, just to push this fender out. Hopefully I can bend that corner out to where I want it. Beyond that, it's just trial and error. Well, I'll be an uncle's munkle. That actually worked. I mean, I knew it would work, but it worked. With liberal use of the 3 C's, which of course are care, consideration, and curse words, got that thing rolled out there. Suffice to say, most of it was, gosh darn it, I wish this God-blessed fender wasn't welded to the truck. I also found out that there's a bar welded inside the lip, which is actually pretty common practice for something like this. Keeps the fender nice and stiff, and boy, I tell you, the fender's stiff, just not mounted to the truck very well. Alright, with the fender rolling complete, and the fender lining up to the bumper, it's time to address this shape right here that we're going to add to the bumper to meld the OBS to the S10. Of course, for that, you can use a little bit of ram board. Perfect. Got the piece cut, took it out of that thicker material that I bought from the store, mostly because I'm lazy. And stick this in here with an 1/8" spacer to hold that gap between the bumper and the fender. Then I'll tack this thing in, start filling in these sections down here, blending it all together so you don't notice that it's multiple pieces. Alright, before I got involved in all this, I had to think ahead a little bit. Got this area scribed out where the filler panel is going to lay. I'm going to clean up to that, but I want to leave that area protected. This whole area is going to be enclosed. I want to give it as much rust protection as I can. So here's the fill panel. I just kind of shaped it, trying to get this thing to fit up nice. Lays up against here, fits up nice to the bumper, gives me a spot to weld. Doesn't fit very well to this panel back here. That doesn't really matter. I want to get this in, tacked up, and I'll pull the bumper back off and clean up that edge, weld it, make another filler piece to go back here, and get that welded in. Cut it just a little bit short of the curve right here in the bumper so I can come across and weld there and leave a low spot that can be filled later. I don't think I'm going to get that nice metal finish like I would like to have. It'll be better for body work in the end. You got to take care of your painter. So Sheridan, I'm looking out for you, buddy. I'm going to clean some of this weld through primer off and get to tacking this thing in. God damn it. Weld through my ass. Damn it. Here's what I ended up with. Got that all molded in. Nice crisp line right here. This section where all the welding was done and down in here isn't quite as smooth as I'd hoped to get it. But I don't want to keep piling on, doing more welding, and end up warping something. This is perfect for body work. Now to do the other side. Alright, with the bumper extensions done, time to move on to the rest of this bumper, which really just consists of an air dam. Being as this thing's been cut, stretched, welded, reshaped, can't just use a factory air dam as much as we'd like to, but we can emulate that out of steel. That brings us to this dam job.
Yeah, we're gonna get some damn bait.
Make a steel air dam, and to start, I'm going to make a template of the bottom side of this bumper. Now, add to the difficulty, I can't get a 4x8 sheet of 1/2 inch MDF. I can't get a 1/4 inch sheet of MDF. Got this 2x4 foot piece of 1/2 inch MDF. That might actually work out nice because then my plasma cutter tip doesn't have to sit on the material while I'm cutting it. We'll see how that goes. For right now, I'm going to lay this thing out based off this center mark. When I get to that point, I'll just flip it over, cut the opposite hand side. I've got the fret edge marked right here. Now the inside of the bumper has this complex shape. I'm not going to cut all that shape out exactly. I'm just going to kind of square it off and cut the thing. I do have 2 little notches that I have to mind where the frame horns stick out on the S10 frame. I'll have to notch those out. Yesterday was kind of a long one. Knocked out the new features on the bumper pretty quickly. Then this new dam job really started kicking my ass. Rest assured I will get it. I haven't been beaten by a dumb piece of metal yet. Just taking a little bit longer than I'd hoped. First things first, I gotta clean up this shop. There's shavings and shit everywhere. I don't want to be rolling around this stuff getting itchy all day. So I'm going to clean this place up before I get to work today. So I did manage to get something done on this damn job, but that whole idea of flipping the template didn't really work out so well. Combine that with that 1/2 inch MDF for the template, plasma just didn't like it. So I ended up with a pretty significant bone pile of mistakes and things I just couldn't use. Due to the width of this thing, I had to get a 4x8 sheet of 1/8 inch plate to make these 2 pieces. And I also realized that my plasma cutter really does like to be sitting on the material when you cut it. You get a way better cut that way. The template issue caused me to have to clamp these 2 pieces together and true them up with a grinder. That ate up a lot of time and ended up covering the entire place with a bunch of shaving. We're all cleaned up, ready to rock. Not going to let that stop. Now these pieces of 1/8 inch plate, what's going to make up the air dam. This is the upper. It's a little wider. It's actually going to bolt to the bumper. This piece will be the bottom. Now I'll come in here, put some uprights in, weld these 2 pieces together, something like that. These little notches are cut out to clear the frame horns on the truck. I got the upper part of the air dam bolted up, offered it up to the truck. Truck wasn't happy about it. These notches aren't quite big enough since this thing hangs so far past where the bumper sat. So I'm going to have to cut out an extra section here and here. Hoping I can save this little strip along here just to keep this thing in one piece for fabrication. Alright, got the upper part of the air dam trimmed back. Still not enough. This thing needs to come up this way and it's getting into those frame horns. So rather than keep whittling down that air dam to nothing, I'm going to trim the frame horns back a little bit. Kind of spread out the hatred a little. Got the bumper back on, it's fitting well. But finding out some interesting things. One of them is I went and measured the bottom along the top of the air dam down to the ground to see how tall the air dam needed to be. I found out the truck was sitting crooked. I checked along the hood here, down to the ground, found a 1/2 inch discrepancy. This side of the truck is sitting a 1/2 inch higher than that side. The bumper is running even with the hood, so that's straight. That explains why I've got a little bit of a 1/2 inch of lean down to that side. A lot of that can be adjusted out. There are a couple plates welded to the bottom side of this frame for whatever reason. That might explain why the thing's sitting a little bit crooked. Either way, that damn thing's going to be 2 3/4 inches tall. I'm going to build a support structure for the lower part of the air dam. Give myself a spot to actually run the sheet metal on the outside of this thing. I cut some more 1/8 inch plate with the plasma and then chopped it off to usable lengths with the chop saw. This section right here creates the beak of the air dam. The sheet metal that's going to run along here will meet in the center. This will give it a nice sharp corner. Added some plates to the side to support all that, and a couple plates out here ready to tack up. As I go out, I'll add more of these plates to support the bottom side of the air dam and give me some structure to run the sheet metal along to give the face of the air dam. This is one complicated damn job, I'll tell you that. Alright, got all these plates tacked up, got the bottom side of the air dam clamped in place, ready to start tacking it in too. This thing's turned out to be pretty heavy. Fucking dog. Alright, this thing's all tacked up. Time to pop the clamps, stick it on the truck, see what's in the way now. Alright, got the bumper back on. Don't have any interferences. Everything's looking good. From here you can kind of see how it's not quite level. Not sure what's going on with that, but I can tell you the bumper and the air dam are straight. We'll go ahead and put this thing back on the bench, weld it up, and start skinning it. I got this whole damn thing welded. Time to start skinning this pig. You get some 16 gauge cut and just start laying it over here, bringing it around the corners, tacking it, both the bottom side, the top side, and to these little supports I put in here. That's it. Well, Les came and stole his truck back. I'm nervous, some people. Since then, Sheridan's been working hard, kicking ass on the paint and body on that thing. Today's the day before the Grounded for Life one-day slam show here in Pennsylvania. I have to deliver this whole thing at the car show. To Wes so we can get it over paint and body. Now, since the last thing anybody needs is another welding montage, I'm just going to go ahead and finish this thing. I kind of lied about a montage. These holes are the factory license plate bracket holes. We're going to fill those. So in order to do that, took some 16 gauge sheet metal, used my Eastwood sheet metal punch to knock a few plug holes out, stuck on some tape, chucked them up in the old vise. There we go, little plugs. I'm going to take these things in from the back, stick them in like that, hold them with a magnet, and zap them in. Well, here it is. Bumper's all done, air dam's on, everything's all bolted up. I gotta say, it's looking pretty good. I would love to throw this on the truck and get some pictures of the thing all assembled for the first time. Like I mentioned, it's over at the painters. And that's a big milestone for this thing because it means it's getting done. So you're gonna be seeing that truck finished. I'll see if I can't stop in and get some progress along the way. Now, prior to bolting this thing up, since it's all in bare metal, I really wanted to paint it with some POR 15, especially on the back side where everything's bare metal. But I forgot I have a product called OSPO. I believe it's phosphoric acid. It's a deoxidizer, I believe, which means that it just takes all the rust off. And it's actually supposed to treat the metal, so we'll see how well this stuff holds up. It's kind of an old school trick. I think it's illegal in California, so that's probably a good sign that it actually works. If you end up using OSPO, make sure you wear pink gloves. What you do is you spray the stuff on, use a little bit of 4/0 steel wool, give it a scrub, wipe it down. Make sure you work in a well-ventilated area. This OSPO smells terrible. I suppose the closest smell is like cat pee or something like that. Suffice to say, you're not going to like it. And now there are more flies hanging around than usual. So on a side note, I might not be putting out videos as often. Me and Ms. Boogie are looking at moving, so I got to focus on that. So make sure, watch out for more videos, like, subscribe, and feel free to share.